I'll be ready in a few seconds.
Okay. We see an indicator that it says webinar is now streaming on YouTube.
Okay, few seconds.
Thank you.
All right, see ya.
We see an indicator that it says webinar is now streaming on YouTube.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, see ya.
We see an indicator that it says webinar is now streaming on YouTube.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, see ya.
Are we ready to broadcast?
Let's wait for
I'm
Lucas.
waiting for Lucas.
Gotcha. Okay.
Sorry.
No problem. Okay, Melvin, I think we're ready.
Live.
We're all set.
Great. So I will call this meeting to order at 5:01 p.m. This meeting will be conducted in accordance with State of California Executive Order N-29-20, dated March 17, 2020. All members of the subcommittee are participating in this meeting by video conference with no physical meeting location. Members of the public wishing to observe the meeting live may do so on YouTube at mountainview.gov/YouTube. As noted on the meeting agenda, members of the public may provide oral comments online during the public comment period for an item by signing up or by phone by dialing 669-900-9128 and entering the webinar ID, which is 967-1272-2958. This meeting is scheduled to end at 7 p.m. and we have a large number of attendees. In order to ensure that we are able to hear from all our speakers and progress through the meeting, speakers will be allowed 90 seconds to speak. Any emails received by 2 p.m. today have been forwarded to the subcommittee. Emails received after 2 p.m. will not be read during the meeting, but will be entered into the record for the meeting. So I'll move on to item number 2, which is roll call.
I will take the roll call. Mayor Abikoga.
Here.
Vice Mayor Kamei.
Here.
Councilmember Ramirez.
Here.
All subcommittee members are present.
Great, thank you. I'll move on to item number 3, which is oral communications. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the subcommittee on any matter not on the agenda. Speakers are allowed to speak on any topic for up to 90 seconds during this section. State law prohibits the subcommittee from acting on non-agendized items. Would any member of the public on the line like to provide comment on an item that is not on the agenda? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. So I'm going to look through. I see one hand in the attendee box. Okay, I see multiple hands being raised. And again, these are for items that are not on our agenda today. All right, Dave, go ahead. You have 90 seconds. And oh, sorry, Dave, before you start, Assistant City Manager Ramber, can you do the 90 seconds or will that be Mr. Gaines?
I will do that.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, Dave, go ahead.
Hey, how's my audio?
Great.
Cool. All right. Yeah, my name is Dave Lutger. I'm a member of the Mountain View Coalition for Police Reform and Accountability, or MVC-PRA. And yeah, we'd like to thank the subcommittee members and city staff for their attention to the issue we're going to talk about. We remain committed to working with you in envisioning a more equitable future of public safety in Mountain View. So that's what I'm going to talk about. Since June, we've been calling for an independent resident-led task force to review MVPD's policies and budget. We recognize choosing a police oversight model is a complex process, and we want to thank Melvin Gaines and the city staff and the Stanford researchers who have been looking into this issue. As a coalition, we did want to talk to you about 4 principles that we've come up with, and we hope the subcommittee will take them into consideration moving forward. So the first of those is that we should reduce the scope of policing in Mountain View and have appropriate experts handle various situations. Number 2, public safety solutions should amplify or must amplify the voices of communities most affected by institutionalized racism and the criminalization of poverty, including but not limited to Black, Latinx, unhoused, and vehicle dwelling neighbors. Number 3, institutionalized racism is real. It's our duty to dismantle it. We must structure institutions to prioritize equity. And number 4, taxpayer money should go to non-punitive solutions. And that is the end of my comment.
Great, thank you. Okay. We will move on to Kelsey. You have 90 seconds.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Kelsey. I'm also here speaking on behalf of MVC-PRA. Thank you first to Dave for introducing our principles. Although our coalition is focused on policing, we understand our fight is inextricably linked to the fight for housing justice. Both are rooted in institutionalized racism, which we must all work to dismantle, as stated in our 3rd principle. That is why we support our neighbors in asking the City Council to appoint a member to the Rental Housing Committee who will protect rent control. In our 2nd principle, we articulate the need to amplify the voices of communities most targeted by institutionalized racism and criminalization of poverty. These are the communities that rely on the just implementation of rent control by the RHC in order to continue living here. If the council votes in September to appoint a member to the RHC who will go against the will of the voters in the community and undermine rent control from the inside out, the council will be reinforcing the institutional racism that has caused our Latinx population to drop dramatically in recent years. MVC-PRA stands in solidarity with our neighbors and calling on you to appoint a member of the RHC who is committed to fairly protecting rent control. Thanks.
Great, thank you. All right, let's see. Amy, go ahead. You have 90 seconds.
Thank you. My name is Amy Scary Ryan. I'm also here on behalf of MVC-PRA. We want to thank the MVPD for providing contact data by race that will be presented later tonight. In presenting this data to the public, however, I'm concerned that the report does not paint an accurate picture of the racial inequalities present in Mountain View policing. For example, the booking data shows that in 2019, 237 white residents and 53 Black residents were arrested. At first glance, this might not seem troubling since fewer Black residents were being arrested. However, when looking at this data more carefully, we need to take into account that Mountain View is 45% white and only 2% Black. So once we control for the population, we see a very different picture. Black residents are almost 6 times as likely as white residents to be arrested by the MVPD. Moving forward, I hope the MVPD is more careful about the way that they present this kind of data to the public. I'm sure the intention was not to deceive, but we cannot downplay the fact that Black residents have proportionally many more interactions with MVPD than white residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Move on to Eva. Eva?
Oh, shoot. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay. I was typing something, hit return, didn't know who it was. Okay, sorry. Hi, I'm Eva Tang. I'm not speaking on behalf of anyone today, just today as a concerned resident. And I've been thinking a lot about some comments that the mayor's made about trying to get more diverse voices in the conversation. And I think reflecting on the fact that, I mean, she said, we're working with what we got in response to, I mean, why haven't we heard from more Black voices in Mountain View? I think we have to think about why do we have what we've got? And we really need to take a look at the racist history of redlining in Mountain View and all these housing practices that have historically excluded Black people from our community and are now excluding Latinx people from our community. And so in the efforts of inclusion and making sure everyone's voices are heard, we've got to make sure that those voices are here in our community. Yeah, thanks for listening.
Great, thank you. David?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. Good evening. My name is David Peters. I am also here on behalf of MVCPRA. We'd like to thank Melvin Gaines and Audrey Ramberg for their report on police oversight models, which will be presented later tonight. The report outlines 4 police oversight models: investigative agencies, auditing/monitoring agencies, review boards and commissions, and community task forces. Regarding the first 2 models, which are investigative agencies and auditing/monitoring agencies, we believe that they are too narrow in scope since they only investigate complaints against police. San Francisco and San Jose have had these agencies in place for decades, but police in these cities continue to mistreat their Black and Indigenous residents as well as other residents of color. The recent exposure of the Facebook group in which former and current San Jose police officers wrote violently racist comments shows us that these agencies have been ineffective at improving equity in their police departments. The third model, review boards and commissions, is also limited in scope and may not even require any action from the police. This brings us to the fourth model, community task forces. As Dave shared earlier, since June, we have been calling for a resident-led task force to review MVPD's policies and budget. Of the 4 police oversight models you will hear about tonight, the community task force is most in line with our ask. However, we would like to see the scope broadened to include a review of MVPD's budget as well. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Tracy?
Hi, my name's Tracy Weatherby. I'm a homeowner here in Mountain View, and I'm delighted that we're having this discussion, and I appreciate what the action plan represents in terms of good first steps. Echoing a little bit the previous caller, the police data report was a little concerning to me because it does seem like the data should be recorded as a ratio of resident demographics. And it really does jump out in this report that Latino and Black folks are way overrepresented, even in just field interviews and vehicle stops. So I would love to have part of the action plan being really analyzing that data, understanding why that is, and understanding whether there is any bias at work there. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you. All right, I think that is everyone in our queue for public comment. So, or for public comment. So I'll move on to item 4, which is minutes approval. Comments from the subcommittee on the minutes? Yes, Mayor.
Thank you. I just had a question. I know there's a listing of all the speakers, and I'm assuming it was probably hard to catch, but there's some just first names. Was it just hard to get their last names from watching the video? And is that acceptable to just pass it with first names only?
Good evening, Mayor. Yes, so we did not have people's last name because they didn't say them. When I was compiling the notes, I watched the minutes and was able to get the names from the registrations as well as what people said. So in the event that it's a first name, they only provided a first name in their registration, and they also only provided a first name when they were speaking.
All right, thank you.
Great, thank you. And I'm trying to keep notes of first and last on my list. I'll try to do my best to also assist staff, make sure we capture everybody. All right, so any other comments related to minutes approval?
There's a public, or there's a hand raised in the public.
That's Tracy. Tracy, I'm not sure if she's carrying over from the public comment or, yeah, okay, there we go. Perfect, thank you, Tracy, for putting your hand down. So it looks like, sorry?
Oh, I was gonna motion to approve the minutes then.
Okay, all right, so we have a motion to approve by the mayor. Okay, second by Councilmember Ramirez. All right, opening it up to public comment. I don't see any in the queue, and I don't believe we received any calls or emails on this one. So we'll just take a quick vote. So all those in favor of the minutes approval, we can just do a virtual raise of the hands if that works. Great, looks like it's unanimous. All right, moving on to item 5.1, business items. We'll be receiving an update and discussion of racial equity and justice action plan. This item is going to include 4 presentations. So we will begin with Principal Management Analyst Melvin Gaines providing an update on the city's racial equity and justice action plan. Then we will receive presentations on 3 items related to the racial justice and equity action plan. From Mikkel Lee, Division Director of the County of Santa Clara Behavioral Health Services, will provide a presentation on the Santa Clara County Mobile Crisis Response Team. Police Chief Max Bozell will provide an update on the MVPD policing data. Principal Analyst Melvin Gaines will provide an overview of police oversight models. And then the subcommittee members can ask any questions we have following each of the 4 presentations. The public comment period will follow the conclusion of committee member questions of the final police oversight model presentation. So I will move it on to item A, which is the overview of the action plan efforts. To Mr. Gaines, go ahead.
Melvin, please.
Unmute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Perfect, thank you.
And you can see my presentation, correct?
Yes, we can.
All right. Well, I'm happy to be here before you all tonight. Good evening. Hope you all are doing well amidst the smoke and everything else we're going through. Glad that we get to talk to the opportunity to discuss this racial equity and justice action plan. I think now is a great opportunity to talk about what the city plans to do and has been doing to address racial inequity and injustice. So, as you all are probably aware, hundreds of thousands around the world have marched, rallied, and protested for racial equity and justice since the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. This call has been made locally throughout the Bay Area, including Mountain View by Mountain View residents. We heard some comments today. People are calling for greater government transparency, greater public engagement, and greater accountability. The city of Mountain View has a history of valuing and promoting diversity. We've provided multicultural outreach since 1998, have put on multicultural festivals since 2009. The city council has set a community for all as one of their major city council goals since 2017. We've implemented a Spanish language civic leadership academy since 2017. And we've partnered and funded many community organizations that serve the immigrant community since 2017. As I said before, right now is the opportunity to go above and beyond what we've done and explore and address the systemic inequity, racism, and injustice that often goes unnoticed by those of us who aren't directly impacted by it. This action plan captures the city's efforts thus far to explore how just and equitable the city of Mountain View can be, and sets forth areas to improve. The action plan is intended to guide the city's efforts to better understand the impacts of city programs and policies on racial equity and justice. It has 3 primary focus areas. Policing is at the forefront nationally and locally. So the city is committed to understanding the impact of MVPD's policing efforts on communities of color in Mountain View and assessing programs, practices, and policies to identify and implement modifications where appropriate. We're also planning a range of opportunities for community dialogue about policing and race and celebration of the rich history and diversity of Mountain View's community. And finally, we intend to review the operations, programs, and policies across the city organization including looking at the city's budget and engaging the community in the budget process to ensure equitable allocation of resources, exploring the impacts of historical zoning and land use planning on communities of color, assessing and enhancing city personnel practices, and engaging employees to ensure that a diverse and inclusive workforce that has the training and resources to provide culturally competent and equitable programs to our residents. To date, the city has already aligned many police policies to national best practices, such as A Can't Wait, and has adopted important resolutions about the city's values in support of Black Lives Matter and denouncing xenophobia. The city is also participating in a regional effort with other cities in the Bay Area and Stanford University to look at different approaches for responding to police calls for service. We're also exploring, for responding to police calls for service for mental health and other social service needs. And we'll be presenting many of these topics today, beginning with a presentation from the Santa Clara County Mobile Crisis Response Team. However, the city's also exploring the Eugene, Oregon Cahoots model as an alternative approach. The police department has begun reviewing data of police activity broken down by race to determine whether any biases are evident. Chief Pozell will provide an update on the preliminary analysis of MVPD policing data. And the city is also partnering with Stanford and the University of Michigan as part of a national coalition of universities to further interpret MVPD policing data and determine ways that if we identify anything, ways to improve. In addition to that, I'll be presenting later on police oversight models. So there are many different models and no best practices that are best fit for all cities. We're seeking to find an approach that will best fit Mountain View. We're further engaging the community. The city's Human Relations Commission will host 4 listening forums starting at the end of this month and running through September on the following dates: August 31st from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. in English, Thursday, September 10th from 5 to 7 p.m. in a session designed to be youth focused. September 17th from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. we'll have a session completely in Spanish. And on September 24th from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. we'll have a session in Mandarin language. The purpose of these forums is to create a space for Mountain View residents to share their personal stories about their experience with policing in Mountain View, whether it be positive, negative, or neutral, and capture themes to help inform police policies and programs. The forums will be facilitated by the Peninsula Conflict Resolution Center, a local community-based organization with expertise in multicultural dialogue and engagement. The forums will culminate with the community convening to share highlights, enable those who share their stories to feel heard, and provide an opportunity for broader community learning and reflection. Information about registering to attend a listening forum will be posted soon on the city's website at mountainview.gov/REJ and through social media and other outreach. And finally, in September, the police department is launching the first cohort of a 4-session interactive learning series to promote dialogue and mutual understanding of police policies and practices and community needs, ideas, and concerns. As I said earlier, we will present more information on 3 items today: police oversight models, the mobile crisis response team, and the policing data. With that, I conclude my presentation.
Great, thank you, Mr. Gaines. So just as a reminder for folks, if they're just joining, we're hearing 4 different presentations and then we'll take public comment. But this is an opportunity now if the subcommittee has any questions or feedback for Mr. Gaines before we move on to the next presentation. Okay, seeing none from my colleagues, let's move on to the next presentation from the Mobile Crisis Response Team. I believe I saw her in saw them in our attendee list. Great.
Hi, this is Mikkel. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear
Okay,
you.
great. Thank you. Mr. Gaines, can I have the PowerPoint for mobile crisis up? Thank you so much. So hi, my name is Mikkel Lee. I'm a division director with Behavioral Health Services Department in Santa Clara County with the Consumer and Family Affairs Division. And thank you for having me today. I'll be sharing some information regarding mobile crisis services. Next slide. So what is mobile crisis? Mobile crisis is a clinical team from Behavioral Health Services Department, and we're a team of 12 coded staff, but when we travel out to respond to crises, we travel in a team of 2, and we assist to crises in the community that involve an individual who may experience a crisis or mental illness and needed to be evaluated for possible resources, a linkage to referrals or hospitalization. Our goal is to assist the individual and reduce unnecessary hospitalization as well as jail admission. And next slide. So just quick history, we're fairly new as a team. We started in January 2018 with 2 staff and with just services available to law enforcement, but we had expanded our services. So currently our services are available to the community 24/7. Next. This is the hours of our operation. We are in operation 24/7. How to get a hold of us is to contact us with that 1-800 number 704-1099. You press option 2. That will send you directly to Mobile Crisis Response Team. There will be a clinician to pick up the call to screen the crisis, to understand where's the location of the crisis, who is the individual in crisis, etc., so that we can deploy the team in real time. And again, what we want to do is encourage the community to call mobile crises when they experience a crisis or a mental illness where they feel like they're not, be able to function or carry out daily activities, or there's a concern regarding their, daily activities functioning as well as safety. So if we're encouraging more community members to reach out and call mobile crises instead of 911, because if there's no crime and no victim, we would like to respond to assist. There's also a dedicated law enforcement line. We like to, we have a dedicated law enforcement line for law enforcement, and that line, when that line rings, we know that there's a referral coming from law enforcement. And for whichever call we receive, we do respond in real time. If for minors who are under 18, please call the Uplift Mobile Crisis number, which is 408-379-9085. Our current adult mobile crisis team are serving individuals 18 and older, but that doesn't mean that we won't respond out to a crisis that involve a minor should the minor mobile crisis team are tied up. We've done that before. We've responded out for calls with individuals who are 8 or 9 or 10 years old. So if they're busy, we are willing to respond to this. Next. Next slide as well. We'll skip this one. So how does it work is when you call the mobile crisis line, you get a live clinician. The clinician will screen the call, and in real time, we will deploy a team. Again, we are 24/7. We respond out whether it's a call from law enforcement or the community. We meet up with the individual as well as the caller or the support person, exchange information, and we assist the individual. If the individual meets 5150 criteria, we write the legal hold and assist the person to the nearest LPS facility and get the person help. if the person doesn't meet the criteria, we of course do verbal de-escalation, crisis intervention, provide linkage referral resources. And we also do follow up by connecting with the individual and try to link them into services should they need ongoing long-term care. Next. I just want to share some data in terms of crisis services. In 2018, we have a smaller volume of services because that's when we are developing the program, and we started out with 2 staff. Right now, we're at 9 and we have 2 vacancies. And you notice in 2018, there's an increase in services, and there's even a higher increase in volume in terms of the demands is increasing in 2019. Next. I just want to share a little bit about our data here during COVID-19 time with the stressor in the community that we're experiencing. So this is February of this year, 2020. If you notice, starting from February up until July, we have quite an increase on all areas of services, including the calls, the services, the field visits, and the number of 5150. So those are data by month for this year. And what we learn in terms of feedback from the community is we're looking at, again, outreaching, letting more people know about the program so that individual would call us first. And then should there be a need for us to connect to 911, then we would do so, i.e. there's a safety concern, etc. And we've been hearing that there has been 911 calls, but the dispatcher noticed that, oh, it's more related to mental health. There's no crime, no victim. So they refer the call to us and we responded. So there's been a few of that, which is great. And we collaborate very closely with law enforcement in terms of cross-training, de-escalation training, meetings, debriefing, etc. We do have monthly meetings to share our data and information as exchanging our learns. And what we're learning from the community in terms of feedback is another learn is to try to implement peer support or incorporate peer support staff as part of the mobile crisis team, which are people who have lived experience as part of the crisis team so that we can better engage with the individual in crises as well as helping them through the process. So that's all I have for mobile crisis for now. I'll stop for questions.
Great, thank you. I'll turn to my subcommittee members if they have any questions. Yes, Mayor, I see you. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was trying to switch screens. Thank you so much, Ms. Leib, for your presentation. I've now had the opportunity to hear it 3 times, and it's each time I learned something new. But I was just wondering, I think one of the issues that have come up in our other meetings, and I understand that it has to do with the resources, but I guess my question is, do you have like a average response time, or do you have standards as to within how many minutes you are able to get out to a call once it comes in?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mayor. We do track our ETA, which is estimated travel time. Within the central San Jose area, our estimated travel time is anywhere from 7 minutes to 15 minutes. Countywide, we're about 20 to 30 range.
And is it you're based in Campbell? Is that right?
We are actually now based, we're spread out throughout the county. Prior to COVID-19, we had 2 teams, one in central San Jose and one in Gilroy. Okay. Yeah, to improve our time. But since COVID-19, everybody worked remotely from their home. So practically we're spread out everywhere. And if there's a call, we will deploy the team that live closest to the crisis to improve our ETA.
So there's 11 staff members covering the entire county, is that right? And they
correct. We have 11 coded positions, and we have 9 on-call staff. On-call staff are staff who work their regular job elsewhere within the behavioral health department. And then starting from 5 o'clock to 8 a.m. the next day, they sign up to go on call. So that's how we're able to cover 24/7. Yeah, so we have 11 and 9 more,
Okay.
9 on call, yeah.
And then what is your funding model? Is it county funds?
It's MHSA,
I'm sorry?
MHSA.
MH. Could
Yeah,
you
it's our county fund. We're with the county.
health? Okay.
Yeah, we're with the county.
Okay. So no funds.
I just want to add that we will explore the need once we're fully staffed, we will explore the need to get additional staff for the after-hour shifts. The reason why we're not there yet is because we can't even fill our 11 positions, because it's a unique kind of service within behavioral health, where we gotta work sometimes PM, weekends, and then we gotta be on call and drop and run in real time, working with crises, which is not a typical clinical work for any clinician. So it's sometimes it's hard to fill. So sometimes we were almost full, and then we lost a member here and there, so we try to fill it. So we're still at 2 vacancies.
Have you, learned, well, we have a program here, a nonprofit that provides internships, or folks who are trying to get their, degree, their licensing, can fulfill their hours. Have you looked at that, like a partnership with a group that might be doing something like that, or I guess the schools?
Yes, actually, we are doing that. We actually have an intern who is a community service worker from Mountain View working with mobile crises right now. So, which is great, yeah. And she's been really awesome, because then she has the understanding and the experience of both world, law enforcement and behavioral health. So we do take in interns as well as, and we sign off their hours while, they're going through the experience of behavioral health to get their license.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Ramirez, did you have any questions? Okay. I just had some clarifying questions, Ms. Lay, if that's possible. So the 2 different lines that you mentioned, one for the mobile crisis response team, and then one for those that are under 18 years or younger. You said that those are available 24/7 countywide. So we as a city could call, or a resident could dial either of those numbers, correct?
Correct. Anybody can call. We have self-referrals, we have family members call, we have school. We have people who actually on the street having concern about an individual that they don't even know. We had that one today, and the person kind of stand by to watch for the individual while we responded out. So anybody can call us. And then the law enforcement line, we're not listed here because it's dedicated for law enforcement.
Right, okay. Thank you, and thanks for clarifying that. I was going to ask about the law enforcement line as well. Okay, and the program's been existing for about 2 years now within the county, and has grown. And the program's fully funded by the county. That's correct? Okay.
Correct.
All right. And is there any kind of movement forward in terms of adjusting the ETAs? I know the ones you mentioned were kind of prior to COVID, but knowing that we may be in our shelter in place for quite some time, is there, and people living all over, has there been any kind of data, or is there an opportunity to be able to track what those new response times might be, or not at this time?
It's pretty consistent in terms of our ETA. The only increase in ETAs is around traffic time, but it's gotten better because most of us are working remotely now. So traffic hasn't been that bad, but prior our ETA around 5 p.m.ish all the way up to 8 o'clock was a little bit higher due to traffic time, but it's been improving. Yeah, and the one change we made was we also had a collaboration with all law enforcement agencies within the county that when they're not sure, when there's a mental health crisis, where the officer can call us to assist, and we help to coordinate getting the individual to the nearest LPS inpatient facility instead of having to travel to EPS all the time, meaning if they're closer to El Camino, to Kaiser, 5 minutes, we can send somebody there versus traveling 30 minutes to EPS.
Got it.
So we've been doing that as well. We sent individuals to the hospital sooner to improve to improve services and the needs.
Got it. Understood. And right now, the coordination usually comes from if the public safety entity reaches out to the mobile crisis response team. Is that right? That's how the coordination is happening?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sure. So public safety is the one reaching out to the mobile crisis response team directly using that line. That's how the relationship is working right now?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And just to add that there was a question, not from this meeting, but a different meeting in terms of volume of calls coming from the community versus the law enforcement line. We have more calls consistently from the community than law enforcement. So the volume of the community calls are usually 3 to 4 times higher than law enforcement calls. Yeah. But we hope that there's more of those where people would reach out to us. Yeah.
Right. Got it. Thank you. All right. I think that is, oh, the only other thing that I would mention is a little bit separate, but just for your edification in case it wasn't known, is the council in February of this year prioritized youth mental health. And so having that line for uplift is something that we'll be sure to take back to staff. I chair the youth services subcommittee as well as this one. And so sharing that line, I think, would be really important for us to do, as well as, we're trying to understand the different resources that are out there. And then I think the mayor had one more question. Go ahead, Mayor.
Thank you. I just came up as I was listening to your response to our vice mayor, but in regards to the calls that come in directly versus the referrals from our police department, and I don't know if it's our chief or who would be best to answer this, but is there a difference in the nature of calls between the direct calls and when referrals?
I'll answer the question based on mobile crisis experience. We had calls where family member called and said that, my son or daughter is depressed, suicidal, and she's currently having a knife to her neck and threatened to stab her, and there's yelling, screaming in the back. What we do with those calls is we usually do not hang up. We set up a phone system where we can triage and bring in 911. So we conference in 911 and we bring a dispatcher. A dispatcher in, where 911 respond faster than us because, of course, law enforcement have the siren and they ways to travel there faster. And then in the meantime, we respond to meet with law enforcement at the home. So that's an example. If there's physical safety, there's a risk in terms of safety of one's, some physical concern, safety concern for somebody, whether it's a family member or the individual in crisis, we conference in 911. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions for our subcommittee members? All right. Ms. Lay, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank
And
you.
then I see some hands in our attendee box. Just to remind once more, we have 2 more presentations and then we'll move on to the public comments. So just to let folks know. So let's move on to the police data staff presentation by our police chief, Bozell.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Kamei. Before talking about the data as part of the presentation, I just wanted to highlight what Mr. Gaines had announced earlier, which is the police department's initiative in bringing forth some community workshops. Taking from our MVPDX executive experience from last year that we launched for community members, we're launching MVPDX Partnership for the Future of Policing, which will begin September 16th. We're modifying it. It was originally going to be 4 sessions, but because of restrictions with public health orders, we're going to have 7 in which we combine a virtual engagement over the popular Zoom platform, as well as then some opportunities for in-person, socially distanced and appropriate for the public health order experiences around our force options simulator. So look for our information online, mvpd.gov, or through our social media accounts, and that will start September 16th, and we will have subsequent cohorts as well. This will be the first one that we're launching this fall. In terms of the presentation for tonight, thank you for allowing us to bring to you our first run at this data in the context of race, equity, and inclusion. This is not a new topic for us. It's been of interest to my profession for decades, and certainly even society. But this opportunity as a catalyst to discuss this in the forefront is an opportunity for us to hopefully improve the way in which we provide public safety and policing services to Mountain View. In the light of this not being a new topic, I just wanted to highlight that we have published our racial demographic contact information in our annual report since at least 2014 in an effort to be transparent and provide community the information that may be of interest to them. In addition to providing the information to our Human Relations Commission, we have internally been progressive with our implicit bias training, having in-house trainers. We have model policies in place, and we have a strong, diverse workforce, high quality workforce that in many ways represents the community in which we serve, and that is not by accident. We've taken a strong approach to ensure that we improve and maintain as best the diversity of the officers and staff that serve the Mountain View community. So going into the data, and as we talk about this, I just want to remind everyone, including the police folks, as I'm talking to you, that what we can't provide with this data is the context of the contacts. So for example, we don't yet know what discretionary contacts an officer may or may not have as they encounter a certain person of whatever socioeconomic, racial background, and then that contact results in a citation or an arrest. We don't know how many people yet may be repeat offenders in which they were arrested multiple times. And the why and you know how race and policing and the criminal justice system and broader issues of racism in our society, the big question of why is where I'm excited, as Mr. Gaines announced, that we're partnering with researchers from Stanford University and the University of Michigan who've engaged in some of these dialogues with law enforcement agencies elsewhere in the United States, and embedding a researcher here, and we're making preliminary steps to start this process very soon, and having someone internally who can take a look at our data and information and start working with us to bring the question and context to hopefully better clarity, since it is a very complex matter. So with that, I can just quickly highlight our information from 2019 as it relates to our bookings, our citations, our field contacts, as well as our pedestrian and vehicle stops. And I don't have the PowerPoint, so I don't know if Melvin, if you have that available.
Was there a PowerPoint sent to me? Let me search for it.
I don't know. I thought maybe the slides or information that we had prepared was available for presentation. If not, I can just verbally go over it. So,
Chief, it was available in a report format.
Okay. So if you follow along, I'll just quickly highlight in our booking data, And we felt it important to break out residents versus non-residents because we do find that there's a lot of comparative information just to the population demographics, which if we just contact people from Mountain View, that might provide some comparison in which we can do a full analysis. But because we contact non-residents, it makes it a little bit more complex to determine why those contacts may or may not occur. In our booking data, about 60% of the individuals we book, which means fingerprints are rolled and a photo is taken either here at the police department or at our county jail. 60% are Mountain View residents, and the remaining 40% live in Mountain View. And the total, as you can see, number of contacts do show a disparate number of Hispanic and Black especially, in which individuals are booked. And again, the reasoning for this, I think, is really what I'm hoping researchers will be able to take a closer look and quantify for us and provide context for. In our next slide, we have information as it relates to our citation data. And very similarly, the number of individuals who are issued citations, and this is typically a traffic citation, could be a criminal citation without a booking, but more commonly a traffic citation. And roughly 72% of those are people who lived outside of Mountain View. Even so, we do show, while a slightly more moderate number of Hispanics and less number of Blacks, there's still disparate information that the data provides. And even notable in terms of our contacts with Asians as well. In our field interviews, these are contacts in which we document the contact with a field interview card. So it's a smaller number, only 125 total, because most contacts do not result in a FI of some sort. We call it FI, field interview card. These are generally instances in which we have an individual who may match the description of a suspect or who may be in the location of an area of crimes that have been occurring, and officers are making a contact to determine whether or not they may or may not be involved in criminal conduct. And if there is no reasonable suspicion or probable cause to go on beyond that, it's a way for us to maybe go back and look if we have to develop suspect information for a crime that was reported, or a detective can go back based on that crime and do some follow-up to determine if the person is connected at all or not connected. And the information, as you see, does show based on percentage disparate contact as well. And the number of individuals contacted who are non-residents are about 59% of the total number. In our stop data for vehicle and pedestrians, this does not include a city of residence, because the way we collect the data does not afford us the ability to provide that at this time. But it does provide, based on the race of the individual that's contacted, an ability to quantify what race the individual is on a traffic stop or on a pedestrian stop. And you can see the numbers there as well. Similarly to our other contacts, show disparate contact as well. Just as a point of reference and not as a part of the materials that you have in front of you, are the victim and witness contacts by race. And while not exactly comparable, the information on victims and witnesses also shows some disparate contacts. So for example, Hispanics make up last year roughly 36% of our witnesses who were contacted in a particular case or investigation. So even though the population based on the census, and in this case, the 2010 census, which reflects a 21.7% Hispanic population, there's a greater number of individuals we contact who are witnesses as well. As we engage academics on this, I think this is another area of research that would be of interest in terms of police interaction, not just our enforcement encounters, but also victims and witnesses as we go about our response to calls and investigations as well. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, do any of the subcommittee's members have questions? Mayor Abikoga, I see your hand raised.
Thank you, Chief, for the presentation. When I was looking at the data, and I did notice the high percentage of non-residents that have in all of the categories. And I guess I'm trying to make some, I'm not quite sure what that means. And I was wondering if you had some thoughts on that, or is that something that could be further analyzed moving forward?
But yeah, I think it highlights just the fact that we're in a urban area, and we have very large employers. We have a very diverse population with amenities that attract people from all over the world, really. So as we engage in policing and calls for service in response to calls for service, we encounter folks who live in town who may call us who are residences. And we, for example, at the Shoreline Amphitheater, of course, there's residences who attend those concerts, but there are a lot of non-residents who may call us for requests for service as well. So, in the totality of the population in which we interact with, they're commuters, they're people who live, work, visit Mountain View, stay in hotels, and it brings a variety of individuals in. So yes, it's an interesting phenomenon dynamic, and how that impacts policing and public safety is another question I think we would be interested in answering.
It's curious, have you had a chance to do comparisons with other cities and their ratios of residents versus non-residents? Are we on par, or is our number unusual?
I don't know. Most cities who do produce some sort of demographic reporting don't typically include a city of residence. I've had dialogue in which, and we're exploring this in the perspective of traffic collisions, since that does not involve, and typically, and unless it's like a DUI, driving under the influence, does not typically involve enforcement, but we respond to either a police officer or a community services officer responds to a collision. What the ethnicity, race, and city of origin of those drivers are, and see if there's any correlation, is just a curious question. And I think as most agencies start asking those questions, more will probably start looking at the specifics around that type of data that we do not collectively as an industry collect or report on.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Ramirez.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chief, for the presentation. Just a couple of quick questions. I think we all may have gotten some correspondence, not a lot, but a handful of inquiries about data related to interactions between MVPD and individuals with disabilities, and in particular, folks with developmental disabilities who may not know, who may not have an appreciation for the situation and how to engage with an officer. Do we have any statistics related to those kinds of encounters?
No, we don't collect that information that would easily be retrievable the majority of contacts, I just anecdotally and in reviewing our activity, do not involve people with disabilities who would have, for example, autism, I guess would be potentially one. And currently we don't, those type of contacts are less than more in terms of our daily activity, far less, but we do not track that in any form or fashion in our systems to be able to provide a report on that.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you. And then, if memory serves, we practice proactive policing, and I think deploy officers to areas where you might have, a higher propensity for crime. Do we have information about sort of the geographic distribution of the data that you've presented here? I think it would be helpful to understand whether these incidences are occurring where you have higher percentages of certain populations, specifically Hispanic or Latino. Can you speak a little bit about how proactive policing may or may not influence the data that you've presented?
Sure. We do have the location data. It would be a little bit more complex to collate and report, but that's a possibility. In terms of our strategies around proactive policing, very typically, and I'll just use some examples, in our areas of high density vehicles being parked or shopping, for example, or even just getting a bite to eat. In-N-Out Burger, Ranksdorf 101 is a commonplace location, not so much today with COVID, but prior to, in which auto burglaries would occur. So in those instances, we have a crime analyst who provides us as best as possible time and location to predict and deploy resources where we might watch for potential behavior, a vehicle going into a parking lot looking for victim vehicles, and potentially a stop being made based on that activity when there's probable cause. And that may or may not lead to an enforcement contact. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. The challenges with that in terms of reporting, for example, stop data, if, for example, another location, San Antonio and El Camino is another prominent location in which we have a high number of crime. And if a vehicle is seen in that area and then is on El Camino and we don't stop it until Castro and El Camino or even Highway 85, the location of that stop would be at Castro or Highway 85 as opposed to where the crimes are occurring at San Antonio. So we would have to build in some mechanism or perhaps look at each case individually to see what that nexus was, because it certainly would be in the report. It just would not be at the location of the stop, which is where the stop is actually affected. It's also based on where the suspect decides to stop in those cases, because sometimes they take us on a little bit of a travel route and don't pull over immediately. So a lot of context with that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I just had two quick questions. So one was related to the demographics provided. So I know that for the Mountain View demographics, that's taken from census information, but related to the booking data, the citation data, when it comes to kind of the distribution of race, does the individual kind of self-identify and that's how you're able to get that data, or is that kind of, how is that information extracted?
It's the officer's determination. So
okay.
I had a question meeting with one of the researchers who doesn't live in California. He asked me, well, can't the officer just take the race information off the driver's license? Well, in California, out of concern of race and inclusion, we do not have race on our driver's license. So it's based on the officer's determination. So
Okay, thank you. And then that was going to be my kind of follow-up question. So I know that it was mentioned by Mr. Gaines and by yourself, Chief, about kind of working with the different researchers. Is there kind of any more information to share with the subcommittee about kind of the analysis going on related to the data, or a preview of maybe what's to come?
So we're literally in the preliminary discussions about the best way to initiate the cooperative project. And in a meeting last week, Assistant City Manager Ramberg, Mr. Gaines, myself, started to talk with the group, the research group, about embedding somebody here in the police department and how that might work, whether it's a contract of some sort or an hourly employee. So the complexities of the bureaucracy, if you will, and the agreements that are going to have to be affected and completed are in the process of being started. So we hope, we're ambitious to say that in the next several months, we'll be able to have a progress report on that particular endeavor.
Great, thank you. Yes, I see you. Go ahead.
I'll just add that while we have Stanford and a potential for a research fellow right in our own backyard, this would be within the context of a national coalition, as Mr. Gaines mentioned, that is working with police departments in other cities, most of them quite a bit larger than Mountain View. And so they were very pleased that a city of our size was as far along as we were and asking the right kinds of questions to begin to look at this data. And that we would be able to not only have that, extra resource of a fellow, but also be within this context of the broader effort to first start with what does this data, what can we learn from the data that we have, and what are the gaps in the data, and then to take the analysis from there.
Great, thank you. And from what I hear from both of you, this is a fellow, somebody who is outside the agency, someone independent, correct?
Correct.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, great, thank you. I just want to make sure that that's clear. All right, so seeing no other hands from subcommittee members, we'll move into our final presentation before public comment, which is police oversight models. So I will turn it back over to Mr. Gaines.
Hello again.
Hello, we hear you.
Sharing my screen, sorry.
Okay.
All right.
Yep, we see it.
Great. So I'm here now to discuss community police oversight models. Amongst the national calls for equity and justice related to policing in the United States, many have also called for greater community oversight and accountability of police departments. Mountain View residents have expressed interest in creating a formal opportunity for community members to engage with MVPD, review MVPD policies and practices, and to participate in law enforcement related decision-making, similar to some of the comments we've heard tonight. Community oversight boards aren't new. They first came to prominence in the early 20th century and became even more prominent during the civil rights movement in the 1960s. However, there are various different models and types of community oversight models. There's no one best fit. They vary in size, composition, scope, level of authority, and budget. Because there's not one best fit for any community, the best oversight model is actually one that meets the local needs based on the political, social, cultural, and operation realities that demonstrate a need for increased public trust and police accountability. I'll repeat that. The best oversight model for a community is one that meets the local needs based on the political, social, cultural, and operational realities that demonstrate a need for increased public trust and police accountability. The city manager's office and police department is working to identify the best approach for Mountain View, whether or not we'll determine what type of recommendation we'll make in regards to a police accountability model. but we've been doing some work, and I'm here today to just kind of provide a brief overview on our findings thus far, let you know about the different potential oversight models we have explored. The primary oversight models include investigative bodies, auditing or monitoring bodies, review boards and commissions, and also task forces. Investigative bodies investigate community complaints against the police. The bodies may have full disciplinary power over investigation outcomes, and are usually comprised of paid civilian staff and may be comprised of a board of residents. Auditing or monitoring bodies review and examine police internal investigations and operations, and they often make recommendations for departmental improvements after looking at the way that police departments handle their internal investigations. They'll make more systemic or operational programmatic changes as opposed to just providing feedback on one particular investigation. Review boards and commissions are as diverse as people. There's all different types of review boards and commissions that have different scopes, different budgets, different levels of influence. But a commonality is that they often provide a forum for public to share their feedback on policing and to make recommendations to police leadership. And a final model is task force, which are limited term bodies that tend to do a deep dive into policing and review law enforcement activities and make recommendations for police departments to improve. I have a few examples of different police oversight bodies. I'll start with San Francisco under the investigative model. I actually combined two different bodies in San Francisco. There's the San Francisco Department of Police Accountability, which is focused on investigations. And there's also the Police Commission, which the DPA, Department of Police Accountability, makes their recommendations to the Police Commission, and Police Commission has ultimate authority. But as you can see in this table, they have the ability together to receive public input, receive complaints against the police, provide recommendations for police improvements, as well as they have authority over the decisions working together. Again, the investigative body makes the recommendations and the commission makes the ultimate judgment, but they have the authority over disciplinary actions for personnel. This isn't a easy to implement model. If you look at the population, San Francisco is a large city with over 800,000 residents. Its police department is also a very large agency with over 1,000 police officers. So that they have a kind of a large issue to manage, and they put resources toward it, funding 35 investigators. So it's a high cost model. Moving on to the auditing and monitoring model. Auditing and monitoring bodies review and examine internal police investigations and make recommendations both on specific investigations and the police department's overall internal investigative operations. Auditing bodies usually include a police auditor and other paid civilian staff. And if we consider San Jose's model, they rarely provide a forum for the public to talk about issues, but they review the complaints and make a comprehensive analysis of San Jose Police Department's internal investigations and makes recommendations for them to improve. Auditing and monitoring agencies have medium to high costs depending on a number of staff. I believe San Jose has 5 paid civilian staff. I'm not sure what their exact budget is, but in some larger agencies, there might be more auditors. So it depends on the size and scope of how you shape the auditing agency. And you can also notice that auditing agencies, they don't really receive public input. They don't have authority or make recommendations on general policing operations. It's usually focused on internal investigations. For review boards and commissions, I've decided to highlight the Melbourne, Florida Community Relations Council. We have the opportunity to speak with actually the founder of the Melbourne, Florida Community Relations Council. It's a model that has been implemented in various different communities. It's one of many types of review boards and commissions. But it's an opportunity, it provides the opportunity for community members who have little to no formal expertise in policing to share their opinions on law enforcement and public safety. They often provide a forum for members of the public who aren't affiliated with the board to share their experiences and to raise different issues that are facing the community. These often are low costs with minimal staff involvement. And the size of Melbourne, while it's 83,000 residents, this also occurs in smaller communities and sometimes paired with investigative agencies. A community like Oakland, California has both a investigative body and a commission, but then they also have a community advisory panel to inform the police chief. So it's something that can be paired with other models as well if you so desire. And finally, I'm highlighting task forces. Task forces are ultimately temporary bodies tasked with evaluating police policies and operations and making recommendations to improve policing in the community. In most instances, task forces are launched in communities that are managing pretty pervasive community relations issues, things that have been going on in those communities. I highlighted Aurora and Stockton, California, Aurora, Colorado, Stockton, California, two communities where police community relations have been strained by events that include officer-involved shootings, as well as in-custody deaths, and other things that have been in the media. Because of the pervasiveness of the issues that they're dealing with, these communities decided to launch a task force that would do deep dives into the policing issues facing their community and involve various different community members who would come from various different expertise. The level of cost associated with this will determine kind of what they involve. Right now, I believe they have a staff team coordinating the efforts and heavy involvement from community members. And a lot of what the ultimate recommendations that they will make are to be determined. They may make recommendations for changes to the police departments, and they also may make kind of long-standing recommendations such as forming an investigative agency or a auditing and monitoring agency or review board and commission. It's all to be determined. So ultimately, there's no best practice or recommended model that fits all cities. The best oversight model for a community is one that meets the local needs based on the political, social, cultural, and operational realities that demonstrate a need for increased public trust and police accountability. And the city intends to continue to listen to the community and assess the political, social, cultural, and operational realities facing Mountain View, policing in Mountain View. According to the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, the most effective police oversight body is one that takes the least intrusive means of oversight necessary to achieve police accountability in the long term. So again, we're working on identifying the best approach for Mountain View. We intend to provide a recommendation to the subcommittee in November and potentially provide a recommendation to the full council in December. As I mentioned in my overview of the action plan, and the chief mentioned as well, we're working with Stanford University, both to review data, but then also as part of a regional collaborative between 6 local cities to explore community police oversight models, as well as our analysis of policing data. So I invited a colleague from Stanford to speak today, Joyce Tagal, and she's going to highlight some of the research that she's done working with Mountain View, Palo Alto, Redwood City, Los Altos, East Palo Alto, and I think that's it. So with that, I will conclude my presentation and bring up Joyce. 1 second, please work with me. Audrey, can you elevate Joyce, please?
I don't see Joyce in the attendee list.
She's in there, Joyce. UT.
Yes, I see her.
Okay, my apologies. Let me find her. Thank you.
While you're looking, I would just add that Menlo Park was part of that cohort also.
I should have written them down.
Good memory.
Joyce, if you can hear me, you've been promoted to be panelist.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Great.
Yes.
We can hear you and we can see you.
Great.
Great. Take it away, Joyce.
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me to share the results of our summer research on policing reform. So I'll just provide a little bit of context. And thank you, Melvin, for sharing the slides. This summer project was developed through the Bill Lane Center at Stanford in collaboration with the Office of External Relations, which is working to strengthen Stanford's engagement in the region. So the project is basically a continuation of work with the local cities in the Mid-Peninsula that the Bill Lane Center has been doing since 2011. And Stanford here sees our role to convene local policymakers and also provide research resources. So ultimately, decision-making on any of these research topics lies in the hands of each city and its council. So I really appreciate being able to be part of this important conversation. Melvin, could you go to the next slide, please? Our project on police reform was convened in June after the world watched the horrific killing of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police. We at Stanford at that time had already reached out to the 6 city managers in the Mid-Peninsula, including City Manager McCarthy, to ask about potential ways we could be helpful in research. At the time, all city managers unanimously proposed to us for our summer research at the Bill Lane Center to be focused on alternatives to policing, with specific practical recommendations for cities in the Mid-Peninsula to implement. Further feedback in July from the city managers proposed that we focus on 3 specific areas of reform, namely data collection and standards, culture change in the police department, and independent oversight models. I want to just quickly say here that my research on independent oversight models was parallel to the great work that Melvin just presented, but we ultimately came to very similar conclusions. Next slide. So here are the types of research that we've done to date, including a literature review of the latest academic and think tank research on policing reforms. I also conducted a number of interviews with Stanford faculty and community organizations in the Mid-Peninsula. Using these resources, I compiled a library of mini case studies on cities that have pursued areas of reform in the 3 focus areas. The compilation of research will be shared with city managers directly, and we hope to continue to be useful to Mountain View and other cities in the Bay Area in this research. Next slide. Here are the key takeaways of my summer research to date for each of the 3 focus areas. For the sake of time, I will not be going into detail about all 3 of them, but I wanted to quickly show this slide to just highlight some other takeaways in all 3 areas, which I've already presented in detail to the city managers. For data collection and standards, the proposal is to begin, as Chief Bazell just mentioned, by analyzing different types of data to identify the different needs for residents in your city. There are also national databases to which Mountain View could consider contributing, some of which, such as the National Justice Database, also provide in return important analyses for your city. So that could include comparative analyses showing where your city sits on national averages compared to other cities with similar sizes and demographics. In culture change, each of the cities that I looked at, most are considering something similar to the Cahoots diversion model. we were able to invite a representative from the Whitebird Clinic in Eugene, which is the longtime provider for the Cahoots program, to come and speak to the city managers. There's a very strong sentiment, I believe, on all sides that police officers right now are asked to do too much. And by identifying areas of over-reliance, cities could help to provide first responder services that could better suit resident need. I also identify in culture reform 5 interlinked areas which cities must get right in order to achieve systemic reforms. Now let's move to the area of independent oversight. I've identified a helpful framework for determining what types of oversight is needed for your specific context, which is very similar to what Mr. Gaines just mentioned. And I'll be going into detail about this framework on the next slide. Next slide, please. So following off Mr. Gaines's presentation on oversight models, I wanted to highlight a proposed framework created by the Police Assessment Resource Center about how to identify what oversight model might be best for your city. So PARC suggests that the first step is to diagnose community sentiment about the police department before choosing one of the several possible oversight models that Mr. Gaines had highlighted earlier. However, in the long term, I believe that all cities might want to consider increasing civilian engagement, no matter what type of oversight model you first start with. So PARC recommends that you first diagnose the sentiment of residents towards the police, and basically the higher the mistrust between community and police, the more oversight and independent investigation might be needed. So for example, at the very top, a community review board may be sufficient if residents still have relatively strong trust in the police department, whereas if there is continued eroded trust due to multiple high-profile incidents involving misconduct or use of force, a city may want to consider an investigative model that will take on investigations into citizen complaints or investigate systemic patterns of misconduct, similar to what Mr. Gaines mentioned happened in Stockton and Aurora. So I will just pause there, but thank you so much for inviting me to come and speak. We're very glad at Stanford to be a resource at all times, and we also hope to continue advancing regional solutions for important social problems.
Great, thank you, Joyce. So are there any questions from subcommittee members on the police oversight models as well as Joyce's presentation? All right. Yes, Mayor Abe-Koga.
Thank you, and thank you so much, Joyce, to Ms. Tagal for the presentation, and to our staff. I guess my one question I just wanted to clarify, so is the plan for next steps to work with Stanford to engage in this further analysis, and then based on that, come back with recommendations for the oversight model to follow?
Yes, thank you. So we will continue to analyze data and to assess the local needs, not only through data analysis in partnership with Stanford and a national cohort that includes University of Michigan, but also from engaging the community and hearing from what we learn from our community listening sessions. Ultimately, we can't recommend a model before we really assess what the issues are and what the calls are from a diverse, the entire community, not just one component of it. We want to hear from more folks.
Really great. Well, thank you.
Yes, City Manager McCarthy.
Thank you, Chair Kamei. I also wanted to add to that in addition to the listening sessions that we're having, and obviously we have a lot of public comment in our city council and these meetings, we're also having a lot of one-on-one meetings. So I know that the police department has been engaged in quite a bit of meetings with various community members who may not feel comfortable talking in a public setting, but who want to speak with our chief or our deputy chief or other other officers that we have just about their beliefs or their thoughts or their experiences. So we've been doing a lot of work one-on-one, not only in the police department, but also with staff. So when Melvin talks about learning, there are a lot of different ways that we're learning about what the community thinks. A lot of feedback that we're getting, positive, neutral, negative, all across the board, but we are looking at all of those components.
Great, thank you. Any other subcommittee members have questions? All right. So the only other thing that I'll just dovetail off of what the city manager mentioned, I think it would be really helpful to share all 4 of those listening opportunities, you know, as much as possible, but also kind of the opportunity, as you mentioned, for maybe one-on-one, as well as perhaps anonymous, you know, information that we can take in. And then if it's possible as well, when these items come back to the subcommittee, kind of letting us know the different methods that were used and kind of how the feedback was given, you know, was it via a listening session? Was it the one-on-one opportunity? I think that would be, I think, really helpful as we're talking about data and opportunities to disaggregate that data and tell the full story of what that is. So that would be my only kind of feedback item for this one. All right, I know that our public has been patiently waiting to give public comment. And so this meeting is scheduled to end at 7 p.m. And I know that we have a large number of attendees. So in order to ensure that we're able to hear from all our speakers and progress through the meeting, speakers are allowed up to 90 seconds to speak. And as was done with our earlier public comment, I will look to our Assistant City Manager and Chief Operating Officer to keep time if that's possible. Is that why? Okay, perfect. That's why you were raising your hand. Great. If you'd like to provide public comment, please click the raise hand button in Zoom, or you can press *9 on your phone. All right. So we'll move on to Jill.
Hi, this is Jill Rakestraw. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
So first, I just had a procedural issue in that I find it hard to have to sit through 3 presentations when I only wanted to address the first presentation. And it would be great if we could get slide decks before the call so that we can go through them ourselves and evaluate them, or at least get access to them after. I have been providing the mental health crisis team number to parents, and I had no idea that they were working so closely with the police and calling 911 when they had issues. I think this needs to be very clearly explained to people. I also was a little concerned when she said the comment about when they take people to jail. My understanding would be I would call the mental health crisis team to avoid calling the police and involving police in a situation. Lastly, today, when I was coming home on El Camino from Walgreens at Escuela, there was a woman walking across the street at Murphy who was in a hospital gown with pants pulled underneath her derriere. And there were 3 policemen who showed up to stop her. And I'm wondering how often the MVPD calls the mental health crisis team in situations like this, or when this person is immediately transported to Elmwood or the county jail instead. Understanding more about how this works would be appreciated.
Your time is up. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. The next person, Ida Rose. You are muted. Let's try to unmute you.
You're still, sorry, Ida Rose, I see your lips moving, but you're still muted. There we go. Let's try to, okay, go ahead. Can you unmute?
I am, and it's remuting me. Can you hear me now?
Go ahead.
Sorry, thank you. Hi, I'm Ida Rose Sylvester, Chair of the HRC, and we are hosting the listening forums Melvin Gaines mentioned earlier. So I just want to say thank you to staff, including Audrey Ramberg, Nancy Ducos, and Shonda Ransom for all their hard work to make these forums happen so quickly. I also want to remind everyone that our first session, intended for the general public, which will be done in English and translated into Spanish, is in just 1 week on Monday, August 31st at 6:30 p.m. This and other sessions will be engaging and professionally facilitated. I just also want to point out that we are anonymously collecting stories and writing online in a special portal for those who prefer to do so that way. And also members of the HRC will be conducting one-on-one interviews for people who need or prefer that format. All of our programming will be available to those who speak Spanish, English, and Mandarin. You can learn more and register for the forums or submit your story online at engage.mountainview.gov. That's engage.mountainview.gov. If you want to share your story one-on-one, you can reach HRC staff, or you can email me specifically, Ida Rose at siliconvalleylink.com, IDAROSE at siliconvalleylink.com. We'd really appreciate hearing from you, and we look forward to collecting your stories. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ida Rose. Next is Sebastian.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, well, this was kind of covered before, but one thing I just wanted to request is about the pie charts of police data and how that doesn't really tell the whole story about policing demographics, because it would be really interesting, since you have both the number of residents by race and the amount of, let's say, arrests or stops and so on by race. It would be really interesting to see what race has what percentage of the population is arrested of that race. And then we can have a clear comparison, and that will show the differences by race in Mountain View. And also earlier, the issue of non-residents came up, and I think it's still important to look at non-resident data, because some of them work in Mountain View and others come here to support our businesses and so on. So we want to make sure everyone's treated the same here, regardless of race. So I think it's still important to look at the data and see what that looks like, and to not only focus on Mountain View residents, because we're part of the larger Bay Area community. Thanks, that's all.
Great. Thank you. Next is Cisco.
Good evening. I hope you all can hear me well.
Yes, we hear you.
I very much enjoyed Mr. Gaines, how you articulated the custom fit, if you will, that's required for each community, as you did. Regarding the model comparison you provided, how do these compare to I think it's called ombudsman. I've heard it before in this area, and I just wondering if they're one and the same. This is also, I want to piggyback this on a comment regarding the MCRT. Great stuff that they're doing. I think it's wonderful. It seems to me that it's difficult to think that simply because the agency made itself available and increased availability over the next 18 months, that the need arose along with it. I think the need was always there, but the fact that it was known to 911 folks means services were augmented. Opening it up to the public, however, was a great step. In outreach, I'd like to know what is going on with outreach. Is there more outreach to the public? It's difficult to call if we don't know it's out there. So that's my only two questions and comments, I guess. One for Mr. Gaines about the ombudsman, and the other one, if Ms. Lee is around still, about what kind of outreach they're doing. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, Dana.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate taking the time to talk to everyone about all the information that's been shared here. It's been super useful. I just want wanted to share a couple new concerns that I have. I wanted to echo what Sebastian said earlier. I'm very troubled by the immediate, almost trying to explain away the inconvenient data by blaming it on non-residents. Non-residents are people too that we should care deeply about. And I think that even the resident crime is troubling, or even the resident statistics are troubling. So I do think we need to take a serious look at that. But I'm also really concerned by this line of defense. I'm really troubled by that. And I also was very troubled by the information that I wasn't aware about, which is that Mountain View is using a predictive policing tool, PredPol. A quick Google search returned by my sister returned the fact that in FY 2013-14 and 14-15, there was a technology initiative to implement a predicting policing software tool. I encourage everyone listening, and including the residents that are concerned, to Google PredPol, P-R-E-D-P-O-L, which disproportionately focuses on over-policing, kind of a broken windows model, which results in the increased over-policing of marginalized communities already marginalized. So folks who are already unfairly targeted by police, it creates kind of a feedback loop that's very troubling. So I'm really curious and concerned about the extent to which that might be happening here. And I think it's a sign that we need more information than what we already have, and we need to take a close look. So thank you for your increasing scrutiny and continued commitment to this issue. Thanks, have a good night.
Great, thank you. Yes, I think I see your hand, Chief, and I think that we are done with public comment. So I think we can kind of circle back and have folks answer. But I just want to make sure. All right, so I'm not seeing any more hands in our public comment, and I don't see any calls that have come through. So I'm going to close public comment, and I'm going to lead it back to the subcommittee for deliberation. And I think I'll start with you, Chief, if you wanted to answer that first question.
Just on PredPol, we do not use PredPol. We pilot tested it for several years, but haven't used it for at least a year, if not more.
All right, thank you very much. All right, I'll start with Mayor Abe-Koga.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And I just want to start off by thanking all of our staff and our Ms. Lay from the county and Ms. Tegal from Stanford. I know this was quite an undertaking. It's quite a bit of information, research, and analysis that's been done so far. And so I'm just very grateful to all of you for working through the summer to get this together. And I think it's a great start. It sounds like we have a lot more research to do, analysis to do. And so I look forward to the continuation of this. And I just want to clarify. So my question about residents and non-residents was not about trying to answer away anything. It was just a question in terms of whether that might be something that we will be analyzing too. So I just want to, as we move forward on this, I understand this is a very sensitive topic, but I hope that we can all keep an open mind and give everyone the opportunity to ask the questions they want without making any judgments. So, I have to say, like the public comment made was very judgmental, and we're trying to avoid that here. So I hope that we can all be on the same page and keep an open mind and listen to everyone and don't make some preconceived notions of why people are asking questions or making certain comments. So with that, I just wanted to say that I think there is more information. I would like to better understand the mobile crisis response team. As I mentioned, I've heard this presentation 3 times now, but I think there's a lot of intricacies involved in terms of how we work with this county team. And frankly, yes, I didn't really know about it until I heard about it a few months ago. And so my sense is that there's probably a room for improvement in terms of better outreach so that the community knows that this is a resource that can be utilized. And I think one of the challenges I see and I've heard is this, as was also described, is the staffing issues. And if we wanted to ramp this program up, which I think there is need and interest in doing so, how we would answer that. And I know that Ms. Lay mentioned they're working on it, but I think that's the other part of this is the response time. And given that we're up here in North County and it seems like it's more centralized in San Jose, that may be a challenge. And I've actually heard when our mayor's calls other cities that are like West Valley cities that have utilized this program probably more than we have. And even with them, although they're closer in proximity, they had mentioned response times of 45 minutes to an hour. So I think that's going to be our challenge if we were to try to utilize this program that's centralized more south of us. The data, I think, it was helpful to see the breakdown. I saw the breakdown compared to our census data. So it's in our staff report, and, folks, I hope will look at that to make the comparisons they were asking for. But I think there is definitely further analysis. I'm curious to know more about, what kinds of stops or incidents these are, and to see any kind of trends. It was interesting to hear about. I didn't think about shoreline concerts and whatnot, but those types of incidents that may be creating certain types of situations, and so to be able to break down the data to see those patterns will be very interesting and helpful. And then I really appreciate, I think the Stanford analysis about different models and what Mr. Gaines mentioned about customizing it or tailoring it to our community is really, really important. And so I appreciate, again, I know the city manager has been participating and police chief and frankly, all of our staff here and working with our outside resources and bringing them in to give us an analysis and data and, a neutral perspective is very helpful. So with that, thank you again for all of the hard work that's been put into this, and I look forward to further analysis. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Mayor. And I think I saw a hand raised from Mikkel and Ms. Lay, so I want to be able to promote her and let her answer any questions that she heard. Okay, I see you. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Mikkel.
Yeah, hi. Thank you everyone for your feedback, and I do acknowledge that it's about time for us to improve our outreach services again to make our service more visible and aware for the community. When we first started out, how we outreach was we were on local news, channels, paper, and then we do outreach services to the community. But it looks like through time, we need to do more outreach and expand our services or make ourselves more known. So I just want to thank you for that feedback, because I'm aware of that, and I do believe that we need to do a better job at it. In terms of, I want to address the other comments or questions in terms of sending people to jail as part of mobile crises. We don't do that. We don't send people to jail. What happened is when we intervene and involved with a crisis, should there be law enforcement involvement, and if law enforcement determined that, well, we found out through this involvement, we found out that the individual has a warrant, a previous warrant, etc., then they make the decision to place the individual in jail. We don't involve with that and don't interfere with law enforcement work, or we don't tell law enforcement what to do. If they get involved and they say that there's a warrant and we need to send the people in jail, we do our part in terms of mental health services to provide the service that we do. If the individual meets criteria, we write the 5150 hole, and should law enforcement say that, well, we have to send this individual to jail, we do make contact with the mental health team in jail and let them know that this individual is been admitted to jail. However, these are the concerns regarding their mental health status, and we share that information so that they can coordinate treatment services for the individual. So I just want to share that.
Great, thank you. Chief, I see your hand raised, so I'll go to you before I go to Councilmember Ramirez.
Thank you. I just want to clarify too that if law enforcement is involved, it does not mean the person will get arrested and transported to jail. Most of our mental health interactions in which we have a person on a hold will be taken to the emergency psych services at Valley Medical Center. We do also transport to El Camino Hospital. In situations of inebriation, we take them to a sobering center for diversion and not jail. So it's not just jail in which police officers would disposition a certain incident with. I just want to make sure that's understood.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Ms. Clay, for staying on and answering those questions. I'm going to move on to Councilmember Ramirez. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll try and be brief just because I know we're up against the clock here. So first, thank you for the comprehensive presentations. I know everything's still fairly preliminary, and I know we're all very eager to hear what comes out of the community listening sessions before we make final decisions. But I think this helps give us a good sense of the complexity and the nuance that we're going to have to be very sensitive to in making the decisions about what kind of oversight models and policy changes we may want to consider. A couple of other things that I think we should begin discussing at some point, and I don't think it's urgent, but we had members of the public express interest in the police budget, and I think perhaps in some of the sessions that MVPD is hosting, if there's an opportunity to maybe introduce some transparency into the budget currently, and why we've made some of the decisions that we've made over the past several years, that could be very helpful and educational for the community to just better understand what it is that we're paying for right now and why, and then ultimately perhaps in the next budget cycle or whenever it's appropriate, we can see if there are changes that we might need to make in order to conform with the direction we're going in. So some kind of budget transparency or budget educational opportunity would be beneficial. And I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I think I may not fully understand the difference between the proactive policing we were discussing very briefly, and then what the member of the public mentioned about some predictive technology. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time with that, but just for my own benefit, maybe better understanding the differences and what our model is now or our policy, and then also how that may account for some of the statistics that were presented. Right? Do we have sort of a concentration of patrolling in certain areas because that's where we have a higher experience with crime or whatever the case may be? Better understanding sort of the geographic component of the data that you presented, and how maybe some of the policies that we have could account for some of those outcomes. On the oversight models, I think this is a great and very helpful start to sort of categorizing things and giving us a sense of what's out there, and to the extent there are best practices, be able to identify those. I do think one in the chart that was presented, one element that might be helpful is, and for lack of a better term, the access that the oversight authority might have in sort of like ease of being able to acquire data, right? Do they have the ability to interview staff? Do they have the ability to at any time acquire certain data that they may need, for their in the policy recommendations that they're making, or whatever the case may be. So for instance, the community relations board idea sounds substantially similar to what the HRC has historically done with PD, right? There's an opportunity for the HRC to spend a meeting discussing policing issues with the chief or another representative of PD, and I think that's good. It's an opportunity for the public to be able to interface in that capacity. It's not a body that has a lot of access, though. It's just sort of an informal session. Maybe what we're looking for is something a little bit more formal, but regardless, along that spectrum, there's an important element that isn't really captured, at least yet, in the overview, and that's the degree to which those bodies can access potentially important data and staff. Aside from that, I don't want to spend a lot of time reinventing the wheel. There are a lot of great models out there that may be wholly applicable to what we're trying to achieve, and maybe. And again, I know we don't have very many meetings. I know time is limited, but having an opportunity maybe to speak with some of the subject matter experts, if we could have, the current or a former San Jose independent police officer, speak or participate in some kind of session later on, just to get a better understanding of how that work is done, or some of the other representatives from the organizations that you've listed. That I think would go a long way. Aside from that, I think this is a good start, and I'm eager to see what comes out of the listening sessions. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councilmember Ramirez. So I have 4 minutes, so I will try to be brief as well. So, I just want to take this opportunity to thank staff, our presenters, as well as the public. Really appreciate kind of all the information. And so I tried to give my comments as we were going through the 4 different presentations. So I think I just kind of high level overview, I'd like to share kind of how I've been thinking about this subcommittee. So in terms of the Ad Hoc Committee on Race, Equity, and Inclusion, I've been thinking of it as 3 prongs. One of them is what we discussed tonight, which is related to kind of police reform and policing in our city. The other related to budget and being able to share kind of, looking into budget equity-based models and how things are distributed. And then how the city as an organization is putting forward kind of our diversity and inclusion. So I'm not sure if each subcommittee meeting will kind of talk about a different topic, but I just wanted to, circle back to how I've been thinking about the work we can do together as a subcommittee. I do appreciate how the city has put together a resource, a web page dedicated to both all the city efforts related to race, equity, and inclusion. The agenda is the minutes. I would also kind of echo the comment of having access to this presentations. I was trying to take notes as best as I could because, for the public knowledge, we're seeing those as a subcommittee for the first time as well. And so, being able to go back to that information, I think is important. And I do feel, as was mentioned with by the mobile crisis response team, finding ways to share across our different city platforms the various information, I think is something of interest, and perhaps we could, that's a quick update to the subcommittee, or that could be kind of integrated into what we're seeing online. I just think that there is, as I mentioned earlier, there's some overlap with youth mental health, and so just having that access to the information duplicated in as many places as possible so folks can get all the resources that they need. The one kind of, I think, thing that stood out to me today related to the data that was presented, the police data, was, while the census is self-reporting and we still have a couple more weeks to participate in the census. So I'll use this as a time to urge the public to complete your census if you haven't. We have about a 72%, I think, response rate, and love to get to 100%. You know, the acknowledgement that the other data provided was a visual assessment. You know, perhaps I think Councilmember Ramirez asked a question about those within the disability community. I think it's really difficult and something that the subcommittee is discussing. I'm kind of moving away from maybe those old type of ways to gather metrics, and if there was a way to integrate, you know, and I would look to the research we're doing with Stanford and Joyce in terms of how we can get better access to that data. You know, a visual assessment of me may say one thing, but you know, as you all know, I'm mixed race, right? So I think that you know, if we're talking about data, you know, or having some sort of footnote to let people know that this is a you know, been a visual assessment, because when the data is provided, how are those numbers assessed, I think is an important thing to understand, because we're not always talking about apples to apples. It's, you know, different. So those are kind of the high level things I would say. I appreciate the different kind of methods and opportunities that city staff and the HRC will be collecting public input. I think that it's sounding very comprehensive, and when it comes back, I think related to the recommendation, I know that you know, we saw the key takeaways from Joyce's PowerPoint. You know, I don't know if we're going to be seeing it presented in that manner to the subcommittee, but if we could just kind of get a consistent representation, you know, because we saw one chart from staff that went into, hold on, I'm trying to find all my notes, that went into the different oversight models. I believe there were about 4 presented. And then Joyce's model talked about short-term, long-term, and how she's doing data collection standards, cultural change, and independent oversight. So I think, you know, how will that come back to the subcommittee? Kind of seeing that there was the different categories that were presented by staff, but then the different categories that maybe it's going through with the Stanford Fellow. So I just like it kind of brought back in some sort of consistent manner. And those are my comments. We're at 7:01. So I think I'm okay. Yes, City Manager McCarthy.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Kamei. I do have a couple things to add. Sorry, I'm going to be the one going over this time. So the first thing is just to talk about next steps for the next committee meeting. So I just have noted the comments from the subcommittee members. And so in the next meeting, we will have updates on various other efforts as related to the action plan. So we are working on those now. And so one of those could be one of the updates on the budget and just how the budget works. So whether that comes in October or November, we will be working on that piece of it. We'll also have some updates on what we've learned as far as how many people have participated in the listening sessions. As has been stated, the HRC is planning to hold the 4 sessions and then do a wrap up in November. So I think that we're just going to have to figure out what happens over October and November, and then figure out what we will be bringing back to council. But we will give you a heads up because there are so many efforts. We want to make sure that you all know in advance and the public knows in advance which efforts we will be updating you on. So we will make sure to do that. Then the next thing is, I just want to give some context about a situation that was raised in a public comment about a woman walking on El Camino. And you know, I think a lot of times I understand why we're here, and we all know that we are really committed to making changes. And I think we have shown that, this committee has shown that. But I also think that there's oftentimes not a lot of context with what people see and knowing what's happened. So with that incident of the woman walking on El Camino whose pants were falling down, she had just been released from the hospital. hospital. She was not mentally ill, although she is homeless. And so what actually happened in that incident was our officers helped her and took her to Kohl's to get clothing, and also tried to connect her with services to CSA. So in that aspect, she was not someone that the officers would have called or would be in a situation for the county mental health team to come, but instead connected her with CSA and actually helped her get clothing after she was released from the hospital. So there's a lot of context to situations that are happening in the community, and I think that the community-based policing model that we have really is just that our officers in situations like that really try and do the right thing. So I wanted to just provide that context with that incident that was raised, so everyone would know that. So with that, I didn't have anything else to say other than we will bring all those updates to the next subcommittee meeting.
Great, thank you, City Manager McCarthy. And I think we've kind of moved into item 6, which was the subcommittee and the staff comments. Does anyone else have anything to share or to add? All right, so I'll move into item number 7, which is adjournment. This meeting is adjourned at 7:05 p.m. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.